Hey, hello. My name is David Olds, and I'm the co-host for Mississippi Happenings. Joining me each week is my friend, Jim Newman. Jim, how are you today, and do you have a joke for us?
Hello, David. Yes, I got a joke for you.
Let's hear it.
This minister tells his congregation one Sunday, he says, the church needs some remodeling and redecoration, and we're going to hang a chandelier. And oh my gosh, created a big uproar in the church. One lady stood up and said, "No, we're not. No one even knows how to spell it." And another one says, "No, we're not going to do that. No one even knows how to play it." Finally, a third lady gets up and says, "And by the way, what we really need is a little more light in here."
Very good, very good. Okay, well, let me ask you this: what do you call a polar bear in the jungle?
Hot.
No. What was that, Ty?
You got me. I don't know.
You call him lost. As we do each week in our podcast, we want to talk about the kitchen table issues that we face in Mississippi. And right now, it is crazy with the possible elimination of the state income tax, public education, and the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in my opinion, the opposite of DEI is segregation. And I think that's where we're getting back to. So we want to talk about those. And the other thing we want to talk about is what the hell is going on in Washington? It seems that every day our freedoms are being taken away by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And it's crazy what's going on. And also what we do when we discuss those issues, we try to offer solutions as well. Today, I want to introduce a very good friend of mine. My guest today is Ty Pinkins. He is the proud son of the Delta. He attended Tougaloo College. He dropped out. He was working as a waiter. He was selling plasma to the local blood bank. And because of financial hardships, he dropped out, enrolled in the military. He served active duty for 21 years. And Ty, we do appreciate your service to our country. He earned his undergrad degree while in Japan and also received his law degree and a master's in national security law in Georgetown. He is seeking the Democratic nomination for Senate to replace Cindy Hyde-Smith in 2020. My friend, it's so good to see you, and my wife says hello, and she sends her regards. Ty, great to have you with us.
Happy to be here with you, David and Jim, and thank you for having me on.
Let's start with what is going on in the state of Mississippi and the income tax. I've read several articles today, and one says it's a done deal.
Mm-hmm.
And the other, wait a minute, not so fast. The Build Up Mississippi Act. And this is what our Governor Reeves said about it. Congratulations to the Mississippi legislature on passing historic tax reform and eliminating income tax. And then he goes on to say, congratulations. What a great day for Mississippi taxpayers. Now, I'm quite concerned about this and looking at doing research on this. It's my opinion that this is a plan that is only going to help the rich. And there was a senior analyst, Diva Butkus, and she's with the Institute of Taxation and Economic Policies. She wrote in February that the move would benefit only the state's richest citizen. She says the plan is so regressive, the wealthiest Mississippi households benefiting more than 3 times as much the lower to moderate income families. Ty, tell me what your thoughts about. Let's talk about tell us your thoughts about this income tax.
Well, my biggest concern with the income tax is, I think, what it's at the in the back of everybody's mind, whether that be someone working up in DeSoto County, down on the coast in Jackson, or in the Delta, a teacher, a farmer, or a factory owner, or a business owner. One thing that we all know is that Mississippi is one of those states, or the state that depends most on federal funds for our budget. Over 40% of our annual budget comes from the federal government. And we see what's happening on a national level, where they're cutting federal funding. But at the same time, we have people like Governor Tate Reeves and Republicans in our state legislature have decided to eliminate income tax in Mississippi. My question is, who's going to make up that shortfall? How are we going to make up that shortfall? On whose back is that economic budgetary shortfall going to rest? And you and I already know the answers to that question. It ain't going to be on the wealthy. They're not going to somehow pay additional taxes in order to make up that budgetary shortfall. It's going to be on low-income community members, the poor. They're going to have to figure out a way to make that up. And they've already hinted at it, increasing the tax on gas, other ways that they're going to increase taxes. What I'm looking at is property taxes. We see what happens in Texas. Texas is a state that doesn't have state taxes. Florida is also a state that does not have state taxes. The one thing that those two states have in common is that they have high property taxes. Is that something that Mississippi is about to see and have to deal with? So my concern is, how do we make up the budgetary shortfall when we already depend on the federal government for 40% of our annual budget?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's going to fall on the poor people. And the other thing, we'll start talking about federal issues here in the state, national issues here in a minute. But if you today, Trump, or yesterday it was, Trump has, started the process of eliminating the Department of Education. Go ahead.
Well, that only exacerbates the situation. When we're talking about our state, our governor, our leaders deciding to eliminate federal taxes, and you hinted at what the federal government is doing with the Department of Education, wanting to eliminate the Department of Education. Well, income taxes is one of the most stable sources of revenue that a state can have. One of the most it's coming.
Yeah.
One reason it's coming, because people don't have a choice but to pay it.
Yeah.
So states know that revenue is coming to support public education, to support healthcare access in rural hospitals, to support infrastructure, our roads and our bridges and our water systems, and to support our public safety and emergency response programs. So what they're telling us is they have to figure out another way to fund those essential systems that support society. They have to figure out another way to support public education, especially given that on the federal level, they're talking about dismantling the Department of Education. They have to figure out another way to support healthcare instead of drawing state taxes at the same time that our leaders don't want to participate in Medicaid expansion. They have to figure out another way to support infrastructure maintenance. And also public safety. I don't get it. It's almost like they're burning the candle from two ends. One, we're going to turn down money that the federal government sends us on one end of the candle. And two, we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot by eliminating our state taxes and somehow assume that we can move ourselves from the back of the line to the middle of the pack to winning a race economically in Mississippi. David, it doesn't make sense. It makes no sense at all.
I agree with you, and I'm happy to say there's a lot of Democrats in Mississippi that agree with you as well on the public education. And this comes from Mississippi Today, the editor-in-chief, Adam Getche. He talks about, educational standards are set by state leaders are woefully low. And he says how low routinely Mississippians lucky enough to earn a high school diploma are illiterate when they enter the workforce.
Mhm.
Schoolhouses are failing in and barely usable. Hungry kids were too ill to return to class, and special education programs, and this can go back to the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion, for our most vulnerable students, literally do not exist. Overlooked communities were wildly undereducated, with fewer than half of the rural Mississippi and fewer than half of Black Mississippians holding high school diplomas. And he goes on to say the political power structure and the political power structure of the influenced state curriculum. One example of this, in America's blackest state, Mississippi, and the heart of the civil rights movements, public school students were only taught one version of history, and that is the white version of history. So I really applaud Adam for writing this article. Let's talk about that a minute. It talks about the money that we're going to be losing. Like you say, where does this money come from?
Mm-hmm.
Where's it going to make it up? And, we've had the opportunity to talk to Nancy Loom with
Mm-hmm.
the Paris campaign. We've had a chance to talk to Erica Jones with MAE. And then what little money we have for public education seems to be funneled away from and going to school vouchers. It's like, my opinion, and this is me, the supermajority in Jackson, Mississippi, they want to keep Mississippians poor and uneducated. And that's where we're at today. That's my soapbox.
Well, look, one of the things that concern me is back to my earlier point, which directly gets to your question. Sales tax revenue is tied to consumer spending. That is a fact. And when economic downturns happen, which is what many economists are estimating is going to happen in the near future with tariffs coming from the federal government, consumer spending goes down. That means that when families are struggling most, the state's ability to help them could be most limited. And that, in my opinion, is going to shift the burden on these local governments, where the state, because it now is not drawing these taxes from everyday Mississippians, and in conjunction with the fact that I think that we're about to have an economic downturn, potentially a recession, that pressure is going to be put on local governments, counties, and cities, who will have to respond back. And here's the circle: we have to respond by increasing property taxes and cutting local services for everyday community members who depend on them. You depend on that hospital that's barely struggling to stay open in rural Rolling Fork, Mississippi, or Issaquah County, Mississippi, or Greenville, Mississippi. Well, guess what? Because the state is not drawing income taxes, one, and because the state does not want to participate in Medicaid expansion, two, and because the federal government is cutting funding that they're sending to the states, three, local communities are going to struggle to get the resources that they need in order to keep these hospitals and these services open and active for people to participate in. And it goes all the way back again to what many of our leaders on the state level, these decisions that they are making. They're making decisions that I believe, not in the long term, I'm talking about in the near term, that are going to cause Mississippians, everyday Mississippians, a lot of pain that's unnecessary.
One of the things that neither one of you have mentioned that seems obvious to me is that if they do away with the state tax, whether it's graduated or all at once. The rural communities, it's going to be a repeat of what we've seen all over the country. Like in the city of Jackson, where the tax base disappeared, and the only people left to tax were those who could least afford it. And that's going to happen as this loss of the income comes and local jurisdictions, local counties have to raise their taxes, which will be the ad valorem taxes, which is on your house, your car, all property, everything that you've got. And the counties that are rural, that do not have the tax base, are going to suffer big time. Mm-hmm. So what are the citizens going to do? There will be, in my opinion, a lot of them. I don't want to call it a mass migration, but there's going to be a migration to the cities that have the money and the tax base. And that may be good, but the bad part of it is those cities are not prepared for that. If we in Tupelo had a 2,000 people move in, or 3,000 people move in, you've got roads, you've got schools, you've got the hospital, you've got so many things that the city would be required to take care of the people. We're not set up for that. They're having the same problem in Europe with mass migration out of the Middle East. They came in and the governments weren't set up for that big influx. But the people in Mississippi, if you want a good education, you're going to go to the areas that have good schools. Mm-hmm. And where are they going to be? Going to be on the coast? Going to be in Madison. They're going to be in North Mississippi. In between, it may be a desert.
Look, there are 3 F's that I try when people, like some of our leaders in Jackson now, bring to mind for me there, and I call them falsehoods, fantasies, and fallacies. There's a falsehood, a fallacy, and a fantasy that a lot of our Republican friends in Jackson think that by eliminating the state tax, that they're going to draw this influx of people from outside of Mississippi into Mississippi to flood the state with new residents and job creators. I don't think that's the case. That's a myth. It's a myth that eliminating state taxes alone will cause a big migration of people or businesses into the state, because Mississippi already has one of the lowest costs of living in the country, yet people aren't flocking to our state. Big businesses aren't developing all over our state, even though we're the cheapest state to live in the country. What actually draws people in is a quality of life, good schools, strong healthcare systems, and safe communities and infrastructure. By eliminating the tax, I think you actually damage all of those things: good schools, strong healthcare communities, and infrastructure, and incentivize people to not relocate to Mississippi and create jobs and businesses.
I think you're absolutely correct on that. Public education is so important to get companies to come here. They have to have a good workforce and health care. And you brought up expanding, because we do not accept federal funds to expand health care. We don't accept those funds, and we have a sick workforce. Mm-hmm. We have an unhealthy workforce, whereas that could help so many people remain in the job market longer and be more productive and, of course, pay their state income tax.
Yeah, you bring up a good point when you talk about the education system. One, eliminating or eroding the Department of Education, and the fact that in rural states like Mississippi, we have a sick and uneducated workforce. Those two things together, that is a national security issue. That equals a national security crisis. You can't have a strong military if you have uneducated and unhealthy people. is not possible. It is a disaster. And we're not even going to talk about what just happened with the nomination and confirmation of Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of the Department of Defense. David, I'm a veteran.
Yes, 21 years.
And I don't want to get us off course, but that just made me itch. Do you know how many active and retired generals we have in this country trained to lead our sons and daughters? And we Americans who love our military, love our service members, we treasure our service members. We sat there and we watched Roger Wicker, who is a veteran,
yes,
chair of the Armed Services Committee. Is he the chair of the Armed Services Committee?
Armed Forces, yes.
Yeah. Chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Confirm someone like Pete Hegseth, who has almost no experience leading the size of an organization as the Department of Defense. Think about that. Think about what just happened today. Let me draw this stitch for you.
Go for it.
Which is why I think we have a national security crisis on our hands right now. Think about what just happened today. What is this? March 21st, 2025. March 21st, 2025. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of the Department of Defense, invited Elon Musk to the Pentagon, allegedly, according to some, to participate in a private briefing containing national security secret information on China.
Yeah.
Right? That's point one. Let me stitch it together for you.
Go for it.
Elon Musk is in debt to China. They loaned him over $1 billion to open a Tesla factory in China. If that conflict of interest is not visible, what is? And we have people like Senator Wicker, and you haven't heard a word out of them. People like Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, you haven't heard a word out of them with regard to the issues, the conflict of issue that represents for our national security.
The last thing I heard from Roger Wicker was as the reporters were trying to get a statement from him was, "I'm going to remain silent." Well, that's acceptance. If he's going to be silent about what's going on, that's acceptance. He's okay with it. If he's not going to speak out, yes, and it's crazy.
That's capitulation. What if you again, Senator Wicker, are the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee? The chair that screams military.
Yeah.
If you're the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee and a person that has invested in China, our greatest adversary on the planet, is literally walking through the Pentagon, sitting in briefings, top secret briefings, and your response is, "I'm going to remain silent," you're not doing your job, one, and you're capitulating to people who don't have our country's best interest at hand, two, and three, you're not fit to represent the people of the great state of Mississippi in the United States Senate.
And I know that your editorials are on your website, typinkins.com. So, where you talked about Cindy Hyde-Smith and also the betrayal of our troops. Jim, you had something?
Yeah, I was just going to, for clarification's sake, there's a number of newspapers that say that this was not a top secret type meeting. And they also point out that Musk already has clearance through his SpaceX program. So I'm not condoning it, but I'm just trying to make sure that we keep the record.
And that's understandable. And the fact that he already has a clearance, that's another problem. That's an issue in itself.
Yeah.
There's so much going on so much corruption in Washington that everybody seems to, it's okay, they think all these wonderful things are happening. He's doing this, this, and this, but they don't understand. But people don't understand the effects. What it's going to happen, when the Department of Education's gone. What's that going to? How's that going to affect Mississippians and other small states?
Well, I think right now on how these changes on the national level will affect the state of Mississippi, I think for a lot of people, that's not what's bubbling to on the top of the surface. Right now, a lot of people are focused on the fact that that our government is under attack right now. The three branches of government, equal branches of government, are being tested. Our Constitution is being tested right now. We have an executive branch that doesn't respect nor appreciate the legislative branch. We have a legislative branch that has capitulated to the executive branch. And we have a judicial branch that's hanging on by a thread as the last best hope, a last guardrail against some of these things that are happening. You have USAID. For some strange reason, we have leaders in Washington right now that seem to not be able to put together or the idea or understand how much USAID plays a role in our national security, how much it plays a role in making sure that some of these countries that need help with regard to feeding poor people in these countries, how that is a tool that we use to make sure that sometimes we get quality intelligence from these countries. Some of these countries are our allies because they can depend on us. Again, back to China, our greatest adversary. When we pull our resources out of these countries, who do you think is going to say, you know what, here, I'll help you out. I'll help you out.
Absolutely.
And so we're creating a power vacuum on the international level that the United States has filled for nearly 80 years since World War II. Somebody's going to fill that vacuum.
Okay,
absolutely.
Well, let me ask you two questions, Ty. Why are you running? And secondly, if you get elected, what are you going to do? Are you going to go up there and
Jim,
Are you going to go up there and join the club? Or are you going to go up there and make waves?
I'll answer your last question first. Am I going to go up there and join the club, or am I going to go up there and make waves? The latter. I think one of the biggest problems we have on the national level is too many people have gone up and joined the club. We have too many people who have presented themselves to the people of Mississippi and told them one thing, but gone to Washington and done another thing, incapable of not towing the political line. Even when their party does something that hurts Americans and Mississippi. So why am I running? I'm running because Mississippi, we have to do something different on the federal level. Our democracy is at risk right now. It is. We need leaders that are not afraid to make difficult decisions and allow those decisions to marinate, and trust the people of Mississippi, trust Americans to make a decision in the long term as opposed to short-term gratification. And I think we have leaders on the federal level right now that are terrified of that. They're terrified of allowing Mississippians to judge them. And one of my approaches is to tell people if and when elected to be Mississippi's next United States Senator, they can depend on me to do one thing: be honest with them, be straight up with them.
How did you feel about
and make decisions not based on whether or not somebody likes me today, or whether or not, or based upon if it's going to help me win election 4 or 6 years later, but make decisions based upon the information that I have that many people may not have access to if I'm in that position, and thinking that this is going to benefit Mississippians in the long term, and trusting Mississippians to make their own decisions 4 or 6 years later. And I think that's part of the problem. We have people that aren't comfortable with doing that.
How did you feel about Senator Schumer agreeing with the continuing budget resolution when he could have held it up and bargained and possibly shut the government down for a few days, but gotten some goodies for the people?
I think, unfortunately, I think Senator Schumer fell into the same trap the Republicans have been forcing Democrats to fall into for the longest, where Republicans break something, right? And then they go and say, well, it's broken now, and it has to be the Democrats' fault because they didn't vote for what we put on the table. That's like me baking a pie that has Jell-O in it, cheese, tomato sauce, all kinds of crazy stuff in it. And it ain't even cooked. It's just a pie. It ain't even been cooked. And me putting it on the table and you tasting it and saying it tastes bad. And I said, well, that's your fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what Republicans do all the time. Unfortunately, I believe Senator Schumer fell into that trap of saying, well, if the government shuts down, we don't want to be blamed and it's going to hurt so many people. Well, guess what? They're already hurting people. They're already firing people. They're already closing federal agencies, the Department of Education, USAID, firing thousands of people, veterans, everyday Americans that have been serving in these organizations, helping people, Social Security Administration, you name it, the Trump administration and Republicans for the last 2 months of this administration have already been doing all of that stuff. And they're telling us in Project 2025
Yes.
that they told us exactly what they were going to do. So my question is, what was his point in helping them to do what they're already doing? Essentially, what he just did was saying, you know what? I'm going to help you fund what it is that you want to do. I'm gonna vote to support this continuing resolution to help you hurt people, which is what I'm afraid of. So I disagree with it. I would have voted against it.
And do you think we need some...
My last point is this. The American people voted in November. They voted. They gave Republicans the executive branch. They gave them the House and the Senate. They already had the Supreme Court. So if Republicans want to drive this bus in the ditch, they own it. They own it.
But they will never admit to that. Go ahead.
You think the Democratic Party nationally needs... You think the Democratic Party nationally needs some new leadership?
I think we need new leadership. One of the reasons I'm running is because I think one of the shortcomings with our form of government. I love our democracy. I love the United States of America. But I think one of the shortcomings is that people are capable of serving for so long that they outlive the pace at which society is moving forward. They outserve the pace at which society is moving forward. They outserve the pace at which our economy is moving forward. They outserve the pace at which everyday people are moving forward. Not saying that people shouldn't be able to serve for a long time, but when you have today 18, 19-year-olds, 20, 25, 30-year-old, 35-year-old, 40-year-old people who are saying, what the heck is going on with my country? I don't understand. Why are my elected officials not paying attention to me? And those elected officials that are not paying attention to these people, this voting group, are 65, 78, sometimes 80 years old and have been in office for 30, 35 years, we are a disconnect.
Yeah.
And then you have the Republican Party, and back to your initial point, Jim, who puts forth a continuing resolution that is clearly not made to benefit Mississippians and Americans. And the person who could have shut this thing down, Chuck Schumer, 70-something years old, and this is not, I'm not trying to play the ageism game here, but this is just a fact, votes in accordance with a method of being a politician that existed decades ago, and not with regard to the situation that we're in today. I think we have a disconnect, and I think that's why younger people, a new generation of people, should run for office, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running for office.
It's, or at least it seems clear to me, and I'm in that older generation, obviously. I don't know about AI. I don't know how to take care of computers, and most of the people my age don't. And I'm willing to bet that the legislators, senators, and congressmen that are over the age of 50, 55 don't have that ability either. So the younger generation, I'm willing to turn it over to them and let them see what they can do. The only thing we can provide with our age is a little bit of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
We sure as heck can't tell them how AI is going to do or how it works or what the next generation of computers is going to look like or any of that kind of stuff. It's the younger generation. If I've got to go to the hospital and see a doctor, oh, yeah, it's great to see a doctor that's got gray hair and is 65, 70 years old. But really, I'd rather have the guy that just got out of medical school 5 years ago and is up to date on all the latest stuff. And I think it only works, the gray hair thing only works when you get on an airplane. I like to see a gray-haired pilot. But other than that, it's I guess I'm saying I'm ready for term limits because I don't think we're going to get rid of these people anyway, anytime soon. And the people that we send up there, they just immediately join the club. When Trent Kelly went up there, boy, one of the first things he did was join the conservative caucus. And I've been there ever since.
And I also like to remind people that Trent Kelly met with the Patriot group from Mississippi on January the 6th, when during that insurrection, during that riot, he met with them that morning. Ty, you were going to say something?
I was going to tell Jim, look, we have some brilliant, capable, and knowledgeable elderly community members that are serving. And now some absolutely brilliant people that are doing a wonderful job. What I'm saying is that those people, with all of that knowledge, I'm not saying that they shouldn't serve. I'm saying that we need the younger people to step up. Our form of government operates off of the fact of participation. People getting engaged. And part of getting engaged is saying, well, you know what? I don't agree with that policy from my senator or from my congressman who has been serving for 25 years. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to run against you. That's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing. That is beautiful. It's not saying anything bad. It's saying that we're abiding by a constitution that says, get in the fight. Challenge what's been going on for a long time, because maybe it's not working the same right now. Maybe it's what everyday Mississippians want. They want to continue, but they won't have the option to choose if nobody gets in the fight and challenges them. And that's one of the reasons I'm running, Jim and David, because a lot of people say, well, Ty, who are you? A young boy from the Mississippi Delta. You ain't got no money. You ain't wealthy. You never served in Congress. You served in the military, but who are you to think that you can climb that mountain running against an incumbent senator for the second time. And my response is this. The Constitution not only says that I can do it, the Constitution demands that we do it. It demands that we get in these races and challenge these people who have been in office for a long time and give Mississippians and the American people an opportunity to choose. And at the end of the day, they'll say, hey, I like what you got to offer. Go ahead on. Or they'll say, you know what, I'm not buying that right now. You go do something else.
One of
And I
the
think
things
that's what makes our country so great.
One of the things that Bill Crawford brings out in his book, he talks about, of course, Mississippi, and he talks about the need for a two-party system. And right now, we don't have a two-party system. Mississippi, it's all, and I don't even call it a Republican Party anymore. It's the Trump Party, So it's Mississippi. It's the Trump supermajority in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing right now is the culmination of 40 years of work on the Republican side of the aisle. It's absolutely necessary that we have a multi-party system, whether it be a two-party system or a three-party system or whatever. And you're right that second party is slowly evaporating. And I think it's 40 years of continuous work to convince, to misguide, to mislead people and force people to see someone who may not necessarily agree with them as an other. You have to be, simply because you don't agree with me, it means that you are against me or you don't like me. And so I have to attack, and that's not how it should be. And I think, me personally, I'm hopeful. I think that we can come back from this. I really do. But it's going to take participation. And is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to be painful? And is it going to be loud? Yes, it is. But that's our one of the things that we all know is our democracy, our form of government, our politics has been loud since the 1770s. Since its beginning, it's been loud. One of the things that our forefathers and our founders taught us, Madison and Jefferson and Washington, they taught us is that we have to participate. We have to play. You got to get in. You got to ask you got to have the tough conversations. You have to say the difficult things and have a debate about it. And I think that's where we are. We have to, at this point, unfortunately, there are a multitude of things that people have to do. They have to protest. First Amendment. You have to rally, get together. First Amendment. You got to do podcasts like this and send it out to people so they can hear it and they can say, you know what, that guy, Ty Pinkins, he makes some sense. Or somebody else can say, that bozo. No, I don't agree with that. You know what I mean? And David, that's okay. That's why I love this country.
Yes.
Let me ask you another question. Let's assume that 3 or 4 years from now, the Democrats take over the House and the presidency, and the Supreme Court is still there. Would you be in favor of expanding the Supreme Court to create a majority that's different than what presently exists?
I wouldn't want to expand it to create a majority that's different from what it exists. I wouldn't want to expand it specifically for Democrats or Republicans. But I do agree with expanding it, though, because we're at a place right now where people like Donald Trump and the Republican Party, that they have manipulated and done things in a way to where without expansion, we don't get back to center. We don't get back to a place where the Supreme Court can be respected like it used to be respected or dependent upon like it used to be dependent upon. For example, we saw where Merrick Garland, when President Obama wanted to put him up for confirmation, and Mitch McConnell squashed that for months.
Yes.
For months, which resulted in a conservative Supreme Court justice being confirmed to Supreme Court. Following year, Amy Coney Barrett was put up for confirmation in December between the point in which the election took place and the inauguration date. She was confirmed. And so the actions that they took at that particular point in time, because Mitch McConnell, even though he's getting ready to retire, he's caused a lot of damage. A lot of damage.
Yes, I agree.
Because they didn't follow norms, they created such an imbalance at the Supreme Court that the American people now don't trust the court. And I think the only way we get back to it is expanding the court, not to benefit Democrats, not to benefit Republicans, but to benefit Americans. And I think, for me, a great number. We have 9 Supreme Court justices right now, 6 conservatives, 3 liberal justices. A great number for me would be 13 Supreme Court justices, 13 colonies, 13 Supreme Court justices. Add 4 more, figure out a way to get them incorporated on a rolling basis, not all 4 at once, but maybe on a rolling basis, 1 every 3 years or every 4 years until we get to that point. But then, in addition to having 13 Supreme Court justices, we have term limits for the Supreme Court as well. They no longer become life terms, but maybe you stagger them. You have 13 Supreme Court justices and stagger them one after, let them serve for the next 20 years. And then you say, you know what, one has to go, has to switch out each presidential election cycle or something like that.
So you don't want to, you wouldn't be in favor of it. Would you be in favor of an age limit?
An age limit on Supreme Court justices?
Yes, sir.
I don't, with regard to an age limit, I think, well, we don't vote for Supreme Court justices, so that thought, I won't even say that. That's something that I'll have to think about with regard to an age limit. I don't think we've ever, when you say age limit, you mean an age at which Supreme Court justices have to retire?
Have to retire.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
I don't think that would be necessary, because we would have, under my thought process, where we had 13 Supreme Court justices, and we said that after so many years, we have a Supreme Court justice has to change. Because we have that part of the equation in there, the age limit thing would take care of itself. Either that person, unfortunately, may pass away and we have to fill that spot, or the person that has to change after, 19, 20 years, that person that's reached a specific age range is the one that switches out.
So basically, term limits for Supreme Court justice.
Yes, I think we should have term limits, and we should expand the court to 13 Supreme Court justices.
Not necessarily an age where they have to be.
Because we don't want to do the age discrimination. We have, again, back to my first point, we have some brilliant older community members who have a whole lot of wisdom to offer us in these positions.
One of the things I want to go back just a little bit, we're talking about Elon Musk and Doge, D-O-G-E. In Mississippi, there was first going to be 13 federal offices were going to be closed. Well, now they've dropped that to 9. So
talking about Social Security? You talking about Social Security, David?
No, we're talking about federal offices in Mississippi that are going to be closed. One of them is the U.S. Marshal Service in Oxford, Natural Resources Conservation Service in Pearl, IRS in Oxford, EPA in Gulfport, Forest Service in Ackerman, National Wildlife Service in Jackson, Natural Resources in Greenwood, Internal IRS in Columbus, and Food and Safety Inspection in Ridgeland. So those are 9 federal offices that are going to be closed. Jimmy, did you want to say something about Social Security?
No, I was just asking if you were talking about Social Security offices being closed.
There are, I'm glad you bring it up. Mississippi, there are 27,000 federal employees in Mississippi. 27,000. And their annual wages total over $2.3 billion. Over $2.3 billion. And with these DOGE cuts and firing of people, again, we go back to what's going to be the impact on Mississippi's annual budget, on Mississippi's finances. One, we already have one of the highest unemployment rates. We already have some counties with the highest rate of poverty. Look at Sunflower County. The poverty rate in Sunflower County at some point was, over the last year, couple of years, was 39%, compared to the state poverty rate, or national poverty rate, which sits at 12%. That's a 27% gap in a county in Mississippi. And so when you say that you're going to cut these federal jobs, when you're going to remove that economic input into Mississippi, in addition to eliminating taxes in Mississippi, I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Kansas found it that way when they did away with their state income tax and went bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
So doesn't seem to work.
Well, no, it absolutely doesn't. I was watching the governor from New York last night, and she said something that really caught my eye. And she said the state of New York is a donor state. And I didn't understand what she was talking about until I heard someone talking about Mississippi later in the thing. So New York is a donor state because they send a whole lot of tax dollars to the federal government. They send more in taxes to the federal government than they receive, kind of like California. It's a donor state. They send more money into the federal government than they get out of the federal government. Mississippi is on the opposite end of the spectrum. We send, for every $1 we send to the federal government, we're getting $2 to $3 back from the federal government. And remember that the statistic, 40% of Mississippi's annual budget comes from federal dollars. And so and she was making the point that these federal cuts, yes, they're going to hurt states like New York, but not as much as they're going to hurt states like Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, West Virginia, are going to get clobbered because they're donor states and we're recipient states.
Gotcha. What do you think about go ahead, Jim.
Do you think that there is any waste or abuse?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In any organization, there's waste, there's abuse, there's people that do things that are fraudulent in the system. That exists in any business. You can open a lawnmower business with 5 employees. There's going to be some waste or abuse somewhere. Someone going to steal a wrench that they shouldn't take home because they want to fix something at their house. Somebody is not going to put enough oil in the lawnmower and it's going to tear up or something. There's waste and abuse all over the place. But what you don't do, Jim, is you don't look at the federal government, the Department of Education, Social Security Administration, the USAID, these institutions that have existed for decades, for generations. You've had Americans that have worked in these institutions for the last 80, 100 years, working out the fraud, the waste, and abuse. 100% clean? No, absolutely not. But you have people that have created institutions that everyday Americans depend on. So you don't take a sledgehammer to those institutions today and assume that you're not going to hurt everyday Americans who depend on those things. For instance, Elon Musk just, 2 weeks ago, called Social Security a Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
Do you know how many people?
I wanted to ask you about that.
People have invested in Social Security unwillingly because you don't have a choice. You invest in a savings program so that you can have some type of security when you turn 65, 66, 67 years old. And the irony in it all is one of the people, the richest man on the planet, who is benefiting from billions of dollars in federal contracts, telling my grandmama, your granddaddy, you that you don't get to benefit from the money that you've invested in the system that's paying his contract.
And Social Security is not it's not an entitlement. And it's crazy when people call it an entitlement. It's my money.
Right. It is.
I know he wants to privatize it. And that scares me. Talk about privatizing it.
Are you in favor of it
We
privatizing?
already have an example of what that looks like. Social Security used to be a well-funded system.
Uh-huh.
Our Social Security system at one point had a surplus. Then we had elected officials that thought it was a good idea to borrow from it.
Yes.
They broke it. The American people didn't break it. The people who invested in Social Security did not break Social Security. And so you're telling me, and I have to shift myself in the chair because this gets me.
Go for it. I do too.
David, you're telling me that, one, we're the richest country on the planet. Two, we can send a robot to Mars and communicate with that robot while millions of miles away on a planet that we have never set foot on. We can do that. We can land a person on the moon. We can have an international space station that orbits this planet. But we got people in Washington, D.C. that can't figure out how to take care of Social Security. That's a problem.
Yes.
That is an issue. And so it gets me animated because once again, they're taking the easy way out. Our elected officials are taking the easy way out. And the easy way out is to blame people who have invested in the system and call the system a Ponzi scheme, and to assume that everyday Americans, elderly community members, people who have deposited their money trusting the federal government, no, they're telling them, you're the people that did something wrong. Therefore, we need to fix this on your back. No. How about making sure that the wealthy pay their fair share? What is so hard about that? I don't understand. I don't understand how we have elected officials, congressmen and senators sitting in Washington, D.C., and they are terrified to say these three words: the wealthiest 1% need to pay their fair share in order to help fix the Social Security system, help fix our tax system. And let me calm down. See?
No, go for it.
See, Jim, you got me all hot and bothered over here.
Well, let me ask you maybe a little easier, tone it down maybe a little bit, maybe not. Why is it we have to have elections on Tuesdays? Why can we not, like most of the world, have our elections on Saturdays and Sundays so that there's 2 days or even 3 days? Why can't we do that? What's so difficult?
Or at least make it a national holiday.
See, now, both of those questions, now y'all want to get me in trouble here.
Go for it.
Well, that's what the people want.
Absolutely. And Jim, that's the problem. It's what the people want. People want to have elections at a point in time where most of the people can participate, where you don't have a school teacher that has to work on a Tuesday because it's not a federal holiday. So a school teacher, one, has to wake up, go to school, teach our kids 8 hours a day, figure out how to get off, rush to the polling place, and vote on a Tuesday. Or a person that's working at a factory, or a person that's working at the grocery store, or a waitress that's struggling to serve us food. The problem is, I think Jim is, there he is. The problem is, I think, that for some in office and in power, making election day take place on a weekend gives too many people access to the ballot. Too many people get to come and vote. The people's voice really get heard at that point.
Absolutely.
There are people who are afraid of that. They're afraid of that single mother who's struggling to take care of her child and working 2 jobs to have time to go to the polling place on a Saturday and really voice her opinion, to say what she wants. They're worried about that waitress who is working at 5 days a week at the local diner to be able to go on a Sunday morning and vote when so she can tell you what she really, really feels. They're terrified about that farmer or that farm worker who is just trying to feed his family. And David, I agree with you. I think Election Day should be a federal holiday. In fact, I'll give you another radical one.
Let's do it.
I think Election Day and Veterans Day should be combined. I think Veterans Day and Election Day should be combined. Veterans have fought and died on foreign soil so that we have the right to vote. And I think having something like that would it would be just a national love or whatever. I can't come up with the right question. But I think at the least it should be a federal holiday. At the least.
I agree with you there, and I like your reasoning behind it as well.
Veterans Day is already in November.
Yeah, there you
There
go.
you go.
Jim?
I think he's muted.
Yeah, Jim, I think you got muted somehow.
Yeah, Jim got muted. But no, I really think we need to make sure that as many people as possible have access to the ballot box.
Yeah, and
there are some who that frighten some people, some elected leaders.
And having a election day like that, it's for everyone. It's not just for Democrats. It's not just for Republicans. It's for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody feels included. Our march to the polls, to the ballot box, should be our proudest moment.
Absolutely.
It should be our proudest moment. Every 2 years, or for congressional elections, for midterm elections, or every 4 years for presidential elections, or for local elections, for municipal elections. Whatever it is, our march to that ballot box should be our proudest moment as Americans, and our leaders should make that as accessible as they can. Did you know there are states right now that vote 100% online?
Yeah.
We can't even register to vote online in Mississippi.
Absolutely.
We can't even register to vote online. We got states that are voting online. And I just think it could be so much more convenient for everyday Mississippians if we had people in office that are not afraid. And this one might get me in trouble, and I know Jim might have a follow-up question from this one. We have to have people in Washington that are not afraid to step out of line. They are not afraid to step out of line. And that's why I call myself proudly an independently minded Democrat.
Absolutely.
Independently minded Democrat. What does that mean? That means that if and when I were to win an election and go to Washington, D.C. to represent the great people of the great state of Mississippi, and the opposing party puts forth a policy that benefits everyday Mississippians, and the party that I'm a part of tells me, you need to get on the team and you need to stand in line.
No.
You need to toe the line. Well, I'm sorry, there are going to be some people that are upset with me, because that's not why Mississippians sent me to Washington. They sent me to vote on their behalf, even if the other party puts forth a policy that benefits them. For me, it's not about towing the line. Well, we're going to toe the line and we're going to save our powder. No. Here's if the opposing party puts forth a policy that benefits Mississippians to make sure that more Mississippians have access to quality, affordable health care, guess what? Tyrone's responsibility is to vote in favor of that policy and have enough courage to stand in front of Mississippians and explain to them why I did it.
Yes.
Or explain to them why I didn't vote a certain way. We have people in Washington, D.C. now who don't have enough intellectual courage to come back and say to Mississippians, here's the bill that got put forward. And here's the point in the bill that forced me to vote on your behalf. Now, here's the bad thing. Here's the poison pill that was there. Mississippian, here's the poison pill. This is the bad part of that bill, and I had to make a choice on your behalf. So here are the good thing and the bad thing. This is why I voted for it. This is why I voted against it. And at the end of the day, and this is the most important part, Let Mississippians go to the polls in 4 years and tell you whether they agree with you or not.
Fantastic. That's
my
great.
approach to it.
That's good. We love that.
But David, look, man, y'all got me all excited over here.
Good. We want
I love
this.
the show. I love the show. I do.
We're good. Ty, this has been great. It's good to see you again. And I love that passion. I love that animation that you have. And we're brothers on that. We are, because I do it too. And Jim has to calm me down a little bit. I get on my soapbox. But it's time, we've got to get excited in order to get other people excited, to get people to the poll, to get people to look at the issues. And in Mississippi, I cannot understand, and Jim will agree with me, why the poor people, the underemployed people, continue to vote against their best interests. And that shocks me. So I do want to tell everyone to go to learn more about Ty Pinkins, go to typinkins.com. Also, if you've got any questions or comments about Mississippi happenings, you could reach us at MississippiHappenings1@gmail.com. That's MSHappenings, the number 1@gmail.com. Ty, once again, it was great seeing you. Jim, good to see you.
Good to see you.
David, can I make a quick announcement?
Yes, please do.
First of all, thank you both for having me on. Thank you for the wonderful, tough questions. I really, really appreciate it. Jim, my friend, David, I appreciate you. Thank you for letting me spend the night at your house. I appreciate you.
You're quite welcome. Anytime you're in DeSoto County, come on.
We got to get loud and we got to get fast. On April 5th, there will be a rally at the Mississippi State Capitol in Jackson in defense of democracy. And on May 24th, Memorial Day weekend, there will be a Veterans Defending Democracy rally at the state capitol. We gotta stand up for our democracy. We gotta fight for our democracy. And again, you can learn more about me and my campaign at typinkins.com. TYP as in Paul, INKINS.com. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you.
We appreciate you. Jim, did you have something, or are you good?
I'm good.
All right. Sounds good. All right, guys. This has been fun. Thank you so much. And we do want to thank our subscribers, and we do want to thank our sponsors as well.